Well, hey everybody, this is BJ Murphy back with the BJMurphy360 podcast, and today I have with me State Senator Jim Perry from Lenoir and Wayne County.
Yes, sir.
Good
That's
to
right.
see you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks for jumping on.
When I went back, and now I'm somewhat of an accounting nerd and love understanding more about data.
But the trick to that, because I've seen some of your posts on it, the trick to that is always taking this raw data and then even the graphs or whatnot, but from a public servant, being able to communicate what that means
That's right.
to the person that you see in the grocery store.
Yeah, and I think being able, and maybe that's where some of the communication side was actually helpful, because you run into so many brilliant people who really understand their subject matter, but they can't explain it to you simply, because that's not the world they live in. And my wife says I break it down and can explain it simply because I'm simple-minded, but I tell her that it's a talent. It's not that. But I do enjoy.
That's a benefit, not
yeah. So one of the things I've always thought about that maybe I'd like to do is maybe be a teacher of some kind. And I do enjoy taking subjects like that, or like, budgets, finance, and explaining it in language that people can understand. That feels good to me when you see someone's eyes light up and they finally understand what something was. So many people are embarrassed to ask questions when it comes to financial things. You'll be in a meeting and everyone will have the same financial packet. No one in there knows what it means, but no one will ask a question. I've seen it so many times, right? It's so common. So it's fun and rewarding to help people.
And so when people always want to land the big elephant, right? That I said, look, and there are going to be people that you look up to, you might even be jealous of, that are going to do that, and they're going to do it fairly regularly. And I would always tell people, you make up in numbers what you lack in skill. Right. So if we need to get to 1,000 and you're better than I am, I'm gonna call 100,000, not 10,000. I just got to work that much harder to get there. But we still both can achieve the same goal.
I got a call from a guy that I used to work with at Management Recruiters, and he had gone to work for this company, Affordable Care. Right. And he called me. He said, "Would you ever move back to Kinston?" And like so many people, I said, "Oh no way! I'm fishing 3 days a week. We're living in Mount Pleasant.
Right.
We love the area
now.
That's right. That's right." But the more I thought about it over time, the idea of that stability for my family became really interesting, and I decided to come interview. Being that I was in that search business, in the recruitment business, I knew that I needed to look into selling my house. But it was the economy was red hot down there. Home sales were crazy. The realtor we spoke to asked if she could put a sign in our yard. And I said, "Well, we don't know if we're selling it, right? I'm going for an interview. I don't know." We get in the car. We're driving down to Kinston the next morning. We're about 2 hours into a 4-hour drive. And she called us and said, "I've sold your house."
No way.
And I said, "Well, I don't know that we want to sell it." And she said, "Well, I've got you 25% more than you paid for it 2 years ago."
Sold.
Yeah. So let's see how it goes. And I drove down, and they offered me the job, on the spot that day. We found a home that would work, that my wife would want. Looking back now, I really believe things happen for a reason, and that was meant to be.
Absolutely.
And
but you took a leap, because from an entrepreneur standpoint, a lot of people get really comfortable in their 9-to-5 job and get a check on the 1st and 15th or whatever. But when you're an entrepreneur, it comes with a tremendous amount of risk. And at that time, you had a small family. Right. That comes with a lot of sleepless nights and a lot more calls than what most people are going to be willing to make. So, that's right. But it was all designed to get you to that spot. When you got there and you were in that management role, how many locations? Because Affordable Care, basically, you helped on the management side of dental practices, right?
Right.
Is that kind of good sum up?
In layman's terms, we'd open practices around the country for dentists.
And you would try to recruit dentists to go, because you knew based on the numbers and data that this was a good spot for a location, and you need to find some staff to get there. Right. So you were heading up this small team, or this team. How many locations did Affordable have at that time?
I was trying to think back, and I thought maybe 25 to 35 or something. thing. It's a little fuzzy for me. Over time, we ended up growing it to about 240 locations in 40 states. So it changed a great deal while I was there.
That's massive growth.
Yeah, it was crazy, and everyone loves to talk about the home run that they hit, or they tell you about the stock they bought that doubled and tripled, and we all like to talk about our successes. But I learned so much about business while I was there through mistakes, right, and failures. That's training you never forget,
right?
And it was very, very valuable for me, because we certainly made a ton of mistakes with that much growth. I made more than a ton. But it's all part of life's journey and making you who you are.
You've got a jacket that says Perry, North Carolina Senate. So tell us a little bit about how all that came to be.
So I had a little gap in between there where I went into business with my old CEO for a bit, and we ended up having an unsolicited offer to buy that business just before this opportunity came available. And when it was announced that Senator Pate wouldn't be able to continue, and we had just closed the sale of our business, I started getting some calls from some friends who wanted to know if I had interest. BJ, I never intended to do something like this. In fact, I'd always said there's no way that I would. I look at the sacrifice that so many of these guys and women make, and it seems very thankless at times.
Right.
I know it's time consuming. I really know that now, having lived that life.
Well, and for those that don't know, we're an hour and a half east of the Capitol, which is better than a lot of our friends, but still an hour and a half to go do a work that you get paid 15, 20 grand a year for?
$13,900.
Right. And so, but you're up there during what we call a long session, which is every other year. You're up there Monday night through Thursday or so.
Yeah.
That's assuming you get there. There's still the campaign and all those other things you have to go through.
So this year I did the math, and I was appointed on January 31st, and we got a session on November 15th. We were in session for 153 days. That was out of about 189 or 190 available. If you walk it back and say this part-time job that I have, which is how it's sold, let's say I have weekends off, Saturday and Sunday, just hypothetically. So if you subtract the weekends from the days available, add in the days of session, and then I was also on the redistricting committee, and I had additional caucus meetings I had to attend. When we finally did the math, I had 23 free days between when I was appointed and when we got out on November 15th.
Wow.
I have 190,000 approximately constituents. If 1/2% of those constituents want to meet with me, that's 950 meeting requests for those 23 days.
Wow.
That's 40 a day, right? So it's impossible. So you always feel like you let someone down. People make requests. They say they understand that you can't make it, but they don't, right? They're disappointed, and I get that. It does seem like the impossible task, but you want to touch all of them and do what you can, right?
We live in a state that is a part-time legislature, and I think some of these challenges, because I've had these conversations, because I happen to be young and served in office, but I heard these conversations a lot where, that's the reason why there's only a bunch of rich people that out there who are retired, because the average man or woman, the teacher or
it's too demanding.
Right. There's just no way
right.
That part-time legislator could be with people who typically have a 9-to-5 job. And the idea of someone who you were just fortunate enough with all your work and the position you were in to be still young,
right.
And have that opportunity.
Sure.
So tell me, what are some of the challenges? I know we don't have too much time left, but what are some of the challenges that you've seen in our state, and even to the other side, some of the positives some positive things you see happening?
So some of the challenges that I see are for the rural areas, and I don't think it's a secret if you're east of 95, we're all in this together, and it's just going to get harder, right? After the next census, the population areas will gain more representation.
And we're going through census now.
That's right.
Well, actually, I haven't gotten a letter. Am I going to get a letter? How does that work?
Yeah, so you can get email links. You can do it online. You'll get letters in the mail. And it is very important to fill out that information, right? It's how the federal assets and aid and things are calculated, and also representation. So, what's going to happen if 7 out of 10 jobs have been created in Wake and Mecklenburg counties and people are moving there, then just by sheer numbers, they're going to have more representation in the future. And you can't expect them to be awfully sympathetic to the rural areas because they don't represent the rural areas, right? Yeah, that's not there. So being able to build coalitions amongst rural lawmakers, being able to get along, right, and put things like partisan politics behind you and realize everything's not partisan. Mm-hmm. And I will say that was a good surprise for me in going up there because, you read highlights in the newspaper, or you see things on the news when we do disagree on something.
Right.
But it's really only about 3 to 5% of issues. Most things aren't really related to partisan politics. Some things, unfortunately, we got a huge divide on.
For example, the budget. There's still an impasse. For those that don't know, the North Carolina, we basically have what you call biennium budget. So basically, you go through a process, you create a budget. The next year is just a few amendments to that budget, but technically, we're still working on a continuing resolution from last year's budget.
That's right. So what happens if you're unable to reach an agreement? Last year's budget stays in effect, plus the recurring parts of it, plus any new budget bills you pass. So we really, every category of the budget went up this year, okay, mm-hmm. without putting in the budget on House Bill. I think it was 966 that we tried to pass, and we did pass in the House and the Senate, and the governor vetoed it. Every department has more money than they did the year before. But what's missing are a lot of good things that we wanted for our areas. Some increases for different classifications of employees have been vetoed. And, it's problematic. One thing I do want to say on that topic, though, I think people have different definitions of what negotiation means or compromise, mm-hmm. right? So, and it's kind of like at my house. When my daughters say, let's compromise, what they mean is they want me to agree with them.
Right. And you're the only guy there, so I know how that typically works.
Yeah, you know exactly how it works.
I know. I got $2 myself.
Now, I'm not positive that that's really what compromise is supposed to be, but, being able to find a path forward for our citizens and for the people we represent. I think that's what we all have to remember. I actually think we're closer on the budget than people think and mm-hmm. people realize. There are other issues. You look at the craziness going on in Virginia with regards to the Second Amendment
right.
and firearms.
I've seen some of that.
Very hot issue, and that's likely going to be contentious because that's not something where we tend to find a lot of common ground. And what will happen is, especially a lawmaker from a larger area where they've had a lot of population growth, and 7 out of 10. So if population in North Carolina grows by 10 people, 7 out of 10 members of that population growth cohort, they're not from North Carolina. Mm-hmm. That's not natural growth, right? It's ingress from other areas and
because
folks moving in.
We're a state that people are coming to.
That's right.
Right.
Because of our tax policies that we put in place.
That's right. So that's helped their growth, which is also interesting, the thing about the rural and urban a second ago, because I want to let you get back to that Second Amendment piece. But we're seen as a state through the census that will probably gain a congressional district.
That's right.
But at the same time, you actually serve in a district that your constituency is different, less populated than others. Mm-hmm. So the concentration of that growth is in some very small
other areas. Right.
And so, we might gain a representative, but your territory may actually get bigger with the exact same number.
That's right. It could. It very well could. We see some growth over in Wayne, but, we've had decline here in Lenoir. But the next districts will be based upon this larger population piece. So it's impossible the district stays the same. To your mm-hmm. point, it'll be different, right? Mm-hmm. It likely bigger and include maybe another whole county.
Wow. That's tremendous. Parting, as you start thinking about closing up, what are some things that you see that you could have people come and help with, whether that's making phone calls or what issue besides Second Amendment piece that's coming up you want people to be informed about? So
I think the Second Amendment issues are going to be a big driver for the polls this year, especially with what we see in Virginia.
On top of the president being on the ticket.
That's right. Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to cause a huge turnout. But One thing that I think people underestimate is you see a lot of registrations belonging to one party or another. It's no secret that the largest growth we've seen is with unaffiliated.
Absolutely.
But you can't read registrations in eastern North Carolina like you can some other areas, because we all have small town values. You get east of 95, we're going to hold doors for people. We're going to speak and be nice. And we do a lot of hunting and fishing down this way. Mm-hmm. Second Amendment issues are really big for us. And it's not about politics. It's about a way of life.
Right.
For the folks moving into our state from out of state, living in the big cities, I think it is more politically driven. And they really don't understand our culture, in the rural areas. It's not about politics for us, but we will fight for it.
I actually had this conversation with my oldest daughter, where she goes to school is about 20 minutes from our house, and there's a lot of country, a lot of back roads.
Right.
And I said, hey, we need to watch for deer. We're in the country. And she kind of looked. She said, this is the country. And I said, just wait till you see a few deer, because where we live, you don't see them.
Right.
But in the country, you do. It gave me a chance to talk to her about why we still allow hunting. It has a lot to do with our history and our culture, but it also has to do with the number of automobile accidents related to deer crashes. And so it is both from a cultural standpoint, but there is also a practical reason why we should allow that to occur. And I think we do a fairly good job managing that environment.
Mm-hmm.
So how old are you now?
I'll be 48 this month.
Okay. So what would 48-year-old Jim Perry tell that 22-year-old just got out of NC State, going to knock the world on fire? What kind of advice would you give him?
I'd tell him that it's okay to be scared,
mm-hmm.
right? You don't have to have all of the answers today. I'd tell him that when you first become a manager, because you're not a leader yet, that you don't have to be that tough. Right, you think that you're doing the right thing by trying to be tough or be hard, or because that in your view, that's what a manager is and what a man is. That it's okay to get to know people and be nice to people. I think that people remember for many years, long after you've forgotten being rude to someone or being overly harsh, they remember. Mm-hmm. And on the flip side of that, long after you've forgotten being kind to someone and helping them, mm-hmm. they don't forget. So I think treating people well and knowing that you're impacting lives, right, in that work relationship, entire families. Over the years, I think back to having to let people go or something happen, and it does impact entire families. And I never took that lightly, especially as I got older and really had a grasp of it. And I figured out how important it was, if you had to deal with something difficult, to make sure you let the other person maintain their dignity, right? Mm-hmm. There's never an easy way to do things, but sometimes there is a better way. And just because you can do something doesn't mean you should.
Right. That's pretty powerful words. Somebody wants to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
So reaching me in my office is very easy, because I've got email with me all the time, so it follows me. So my legislative email address is jim.perry@ncleg.net. That's the easiest way. It follows me. I can get back to you at the appropriate time, and then I have a good record of it, and I don't forget.
Right. No, that is true. Well, Jim, thank you for being on.
Thank you.
Appreciate your service. Also appreciate you being willing to jump out there again. Congratulations on your success, and I wish your family the best. Thank you all for watching this episode of BJ Murphy 360. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Take care, and God bless.